Few people dared to challenge the paradigms of modern science like Stephen Hawking. But what if I told you that, behind the icon of absolute rationalism, there's a practically unknown story, a confidential, almost forbidden account, capable of questioning everything we think we know about consciousness and what happens after death? Imagine for a moment, the greatest skeptic of our time, author of phrases like, "Heaven is a fairy tale for people afraid of the dark," involved in an unprecedented conversation about what may or may not come after our last breath. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this. Have you ever stopped to think about what really happens when everything apparently ends? Have you ever wondered if there's something on the other side? If even the brightest minds, those who dedicated their lives to logical reasoning, wavered for an instant before this mystery? Today, we'll journey together into unknown territory, guided by Stephen Hawking's words, experiences, and above all, his doubts. Get ready, because in this video, you won't find ready answers, but perhaps you'll find something even more valuable: permission to question. Before we dive into this intriguing journey, I want to ask you something. If you've ever felt that pang of curiosity, or if you've ever sought a greater meaning like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and most importantly, share your question in the comments. What do you believe happens after death? Your experience might light the way for others. Now, take a deep breath and come with me, because the story you're about to hear is as surprising as it is true. Imagine the scene. Stephen Hawking, already weakened, sitting before a small group of students and researchers. The room is silent, but the tension is palpable. In that instant, the words he's about to utter aren't for the newspapers, nor for textbooks. They're confidential, closely guarded secrets. Do you feel the chill? Do you feel the anticipation of the unexpected? Well, this is exactly where our search begins. Stephen Hawking is, for many, the very personification of reason in flesh and blood. A man who, with his enigmatic smile and accessible explanations of black holes and the origin of the universe, captivated entire generations. Hawking's public image was always that of the unshakable scientist, capable of transforming impossible questions into simple, almost playful answers. His synthetic voice, transformed into a symbol, crossed borders and reached millions of homes. His phrases adorned paintings, t-shirts, memes. Hawking became, over time, an archetype of the rationalist, someone who, unlike most, isn't bound by emotions or beliefs. But what if I told you there's another side to this story? A side rarely shown, hidden behind the curtains of intimacy, far from the spotlight of conferences and the buzz of social media. Because, as brilliant as he was, Hawking was, in the end, human. And like every human, he also had his moments of uncertainty, of disturbing silence, of sleepless nights staring at the ceiling and wondering, what if I'm wrong? What if there's something beyond what science can measure? It's precisely this hidden side we're going to talk about. About the Hawking who laughed at silly jokes, who was moved by old songs, who clung to childhood memories, and, yes, who confided to close friends that he sometimes felt an inexplicable emptiness. And who hasn't felt, even for an instant, the suspicion that perhaps there's something bigger. Something that challenges not only knowledge, but the very notion of knowledge. If you felt this, know that you're in excellent company. And just like us, Hawking was also surprised by circumstances that forced him off script. After all, no matter how much we try to cling to logic, there are times when it simply isn't enough. Get ready to discover what happens when even the greatest symbol of reason finds himself facing humanity's oldest doubts. Now imagine, a cold night in Cambridge. The clock ticks close to midnight. Hawking, in his famous book-filled office, receives a visit from 3 young, anxious, and somewhat scared researchers. The official reason for the meeting was to discuss cosmology, but the conversation quickly took another turn. One of those present, whose identity remains confidential, dared to ask the question many avoid. "Professor, do you truly believe that consciousness completely fades with death?" A heavy silence filled the room. Hawking closed his eyes for an instant and, according to reports, offered an almost imperceptible smile. Then he uttered phrases that would never be published. What we're calling consciousness is perhaps just a transient property, a temporary manifestation of something larger, Science doesn't yet have the means to capture everything. Neither do I. The young people exchanged glances. It wasn't the expected answer, nor the one defended in books and interviews. They were witnessing not the inflexible genius, but the vulnerable human being, open to doubt. Hawking continued, I've always said I don't believe in an afterlife in religious terms, but to deny the possibility of levels of existence beyond what we can measure would be for me also an act of faith, and I refuse to have faith in both the existence and non-existence of something after death. These words remained etched in the memory of those present, passed down almost like a secret from generation to generation, whispered in the silent corridors of academia. And for obvious reasons, they never made it to headlines or documentaries. It's this hidden, almost forbidden side that we bring to light today. Stephen Hawking's confidential interview about consciousness after death isn't just an account. It's an invitation to reflect, a call to abandon comfortable certainties and embrace the mystery. Do you perceive the depth of this moment? Even the man who faced death up close multiple times admitted to a few that the limits of science aren't the limits of reality. That perhaps there's a spark, a continuity, something beyond what we can explain. And that for many mature people might sound like a relief, a kind of veiled permission to question without guilt, to look at the unknown without fear. Now looking into your eyes, yes, yours, I want to share something profoundly human. Talking about death isn't easy. For many of us, especially those who have lived long enough to feel the fragility of existence, this topic is avoided, swept under the rug of everyday conversations. We prefer to talk about the weather, about old recipes, about children and grandchildren, about happy memories of youth. And that's okay. It's understandable that we prefer not to touch on this subject. After all, it's a part of life full of mysteries, insecurities, and often fear. But allow me to tell you, you're not alone in this restlessness. It doesn't matter if you consider yourself religious, spiritual, skeptical, or simply someone who wants to enjoy each day to the fullest. The fact is that all of us, at some point in our journey, are visited by this uncomfortable question. What will become of me, my consciousness, my thoughts, my memories, when it all ends? Think about it. How many times have you found yourself, in the silence of the night, pondering this doubt? How many times has some news, a sudden farewell, or even a simple song, awakened in you a feeling that there's something more? An intuition, perhaps, that existence isn't limited to what we can touch, measure, or rationally explain. There's a deep beauty in this questioning. It connects generations, crosses borders, unites strangers. And Stephen Hawking, with all his reputation as a rationalist, keenly perceived this. Most people, he once said, prefer to believe in something because the void scares them. And is he wrong? The void is indeed frightening, but at the same time, it's what drives us to seek, to build, to leave a legacy. Now I need to ask you a direct question. Have you ever felt this emptiness? Have you ever wondered what lies beyond this life? If so, write your experience in the comments. Our channel is a safe space for doubts, for anxieties, for sharing fears, and who knows, even finding a spark of hope. Interact with others, exchange stories, experiences. This makes all the difference for those who, like you, are searching for meaning. Feel part of a community. Here, no one needs to be ashamed of feeling fear or of dreaming of infinite possibilities. On this channel, we validate all questions. After all, it's them, not definitive answers, that truly make us human. Do you see where we're going? From a fraction of a second, from a strange silence on a cold Cambridge night, we transition from the limits of hard knowledge to the hazy region of imagination and doubt. But if you've made it this far, it's because you feel that this path is worthwhile. It's worth looking where great geniuses also looked, into the unknown, into the abyss of perhaps. And this is where our journey truly begins. I don't promise to give ready answers or magic formulas, but I do promise from now on to guide you through reflections that blend science, philosophy, and humanity. We'll revisit ideas that have stood the test of time, confront uncomfortable concepts, and above all, allow ourselves the freedom to question. Yes, even you who call yourself absolutely skeptical. After all, how much courage there is in those who doubt. It's important to understand, this video isn't about trying to convince you of a belief. It's not a religious manual, nor an ode to the supernatural. Quite the opposite. Here, our starting point is intellectual honesty. Doubting is part of the scientific path. In fact, science exists precisely because doubt exists. Hawking himself, in one of his interviews, said that intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. What is change, if not opening oneself to the new, even if that new is just a new question? Think about humanity's great questions, from philosophy to the laboratory, from the temple to the classroom, from the deathbed to birth. The mystery of consciousness after death is perhaps the oldest of all, and the search for meaning, whatever it may be, is what moves civilizations, inspires poets, comforts the afflicted, and challenges geniuses. Our proposal is to provide you with tools to think, to feel, to converse with yourself and with the world. We won't deny science, nor will we overvalue blind faith. Together, we will learn to doubt with respect and to admire with humility. Perhaps you're asking yourself, but what's the point of thinking about this now? The answer is simple. Because by reflecting on death and everything that may or may not be after it, we end up discovering more about life. What truly matters? What legacy do we leave? What makes our story worth telling? I invite you once again to participate actively. Tell us in the comments. At some point, did a doubt about what exists beyond this plane make you change your behavior? A loss, an illness, a victory, a love? Your answer can be a compass for other navigators in this ocean of uncertainties. Take a deep breath. Are you ready? The road of big questions has no maps, but it has a lot of company. And that's what makes this journey so special. To understand why Hawking's confidential words have such an impact, we first need to see the man behind the myth. Stephen Hawking was born in Oxford, a time marked by wars and uncertainties. He grew up curious, questioning, somewhat rebellious. From an early age, his teachers said he had a different sparkle in his eye, that typical sparkle of someone always 2 steps ahead of common questions. Throughout his life, he faced challenges that would have crushed many others. The diagnosis of ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, came early, and with it a sentence of only a few years to live. But Hawking didn't succumb to despair. He faced the disease as a mystery to be understood, and in the forced silence of his body, his mind raced even further. Black holes, dimensions, time, dark matter. His public stance was always clear. The brain is like a computer that stops working when its components fail. There is no heaven or afterlife for broken computers. That's a fairy tale for people afraid of the dark. It was a dry, rational, direct blow. But only those who truly lived with Hawking know how he appreciated nuances, how he was capable of surprising with unexpected phrases. There are accounts from close colleagues, like Kip Thorne and Roger Penrose, that Hawking in private was fascinated by unanswered questions. He liked to provoke. What if we're looking in the wrong direction? What if consciousness is more like a quantum field than a light switch? At such times, Hawking showed his more human side. Not the scientist who dictates truths, but the seeker, the restless one. In one encounter, his daughter Lucy recalled, "My father was never afraid of the unknown. He respected it." It is precisely this respect, this humility in the face of the inexplicable, that makes Hawking a symbol not only of intellect, but of the courage to doubt. Over the years, unpublished interviews, letters exchanged with friends, and even informal recordings reveal phrases of touching depth. Science, he used to say, has not yet finished its work. As much as we know, there is always one last question, one last frontier. I want you to feel this. Even the greatest genius of our time knew his own ignorance, and he wasn't ashamed. So why would you be? Hawking taught us, above all, that intellectual vulnerability is strength, not weakness. It was precisely this openness to mystery that allowed him to go beyond the surface, to think differently, to dare. That's why today, his words resonate so strongly among those seeking meaning amidst chaos. The lesson is clear. No matter how solid our certainties, there's always room for new questions. And in the end, it's those questions that truly make us human. Let's dive even deeper into what truly frightens us, the abyss of uncertainty. No matter how advanced science is, no matter how sophisticated the instruments, we are still, in the face of the great mystery, just apprentices. And Hawking knew this like few others. Imagine consciousness as a radio wave. During life, our device, the brain, captures, processes, transmits signals. But when the device shuts down, what happens to the wave? Does it cease to exist, or does it simply continue, waiting for another receiver capable of tuning into it? This metaphor, frequently used by physicists and philosophers, helps to translate a complex idea, that perhaps consciousness is something greater than the sum of our neurons. Hawking never stated this publicly, but in private confidences he admitted that science still cannot satisfactorily explain the phenomenon of consciousness. Do we know how the brain generates thoughts, he would ask, or do we simply observe effects and deduce causes that may be beyond what we imagine? It's in this space, between what we know and what we intuit, that true philosophy resides, the endless search. And don't think this doubt is exclusive to geniuses. All of us, at some point, experience a strange sensation, a déjà vu, a lucid dream, an inexplicable connection with someone at a distance. Who hasn't felt that there's something more, even without knowing what to call it? In various cultures, there are accounts of near-death experiences, visions, intuitions, sensations of presence. Science explains part of this, but only part. Go back to the radio metaphor. Imagine that, for a moment, you can tune into a different frequency. You miss someone who has passed away. You dream of loved ones. You imagine impossible dialogues. Is it just the brain playing tricks, or is there something more? Hawking, even in his sleepless nights, allowed himself this question. Not to find a definitive answer, but to keep curiosity alive. The dilemma is this: live seeking to solve the enigma, or embrace doubt as an essential part of existence. In his letters, Hawking wrote, "I don't fear the unknown, I only fear not having asked enough." What a powerful lesson. Now, how about reflecting? How many dilemmas in your life were born from uncertainty? How many moments of courage blossomed when you decided to ask, instead of just accepting? This is the invitation. Accept that doubt isn't weakness, it's the engine of transformation. If even the greatest symbol of reason allowed himself to waver, who are we to flee from this universal vulnerability? Delve deeper into this dilemma. Share in the comments a situation where a doubt changed your life. Sometimes, a good question is worth more than 1,000 shallow answers. Now I want to invite you to take a step beyond Stephen Hawking's universe. Let's look outside the cold walls of Cambridge academia, into the real world, where millions of people live daily with the question, what happens when life ends? The impact of Hawking's words, even the confidential ones, resonates not only in the minds of theorists, but mainly in the hearts of those who feel the proximity of finitude. Terminally ill patients, caregivers, the elderly, grieving families, seekers of meaning. Imagine the scene of a silent hospital, a family around a farewell bedside. How many haven't wished to hear in those moments a relief? Don't be afraid, there might be more. Consciousness might not just turn off like a switch. Here, the certainties of science share space with hope, and curiously, there's no shame in that hope. It's human, legitimate, universal. Hawking, despite being a symbol of skepticism, became a kind of guide for these inner journeys. By admitting the impossibility of definitive statements about the afterlife, he allowed thousands of people to breathe more easily. The simple fact that someone so brilliant recognized limits to his own reason seems to free others to do the same. In discussion forums, grief support groups, and conversations among caregivers, it's common to hear debates inspired by Hawking's phrases and attitudes. It's as if his vulnerability gave permission for each person to accept their own doubt, or even their own faith, without guilt. Listen to this fictional testimony, but based on thousands of real accounts. When I lost my father, I felt an immense void. I was always skeptical, but reading Hawking's words about not dismissing possibilities, I allowed myself to look at the mystery with less fear. I didn't need to cling to a belief, I just needed to rest in the doubt. The social repercussion of the mystery is even more intense in scientific communities. Young researchers find the courage to investigate phenomena of consciousness without the stigma of appearing mystical. Palliative care doctors, psychologists, priests, and even people who never cared about physics feel touched. Because the debate is no longer just about soul, energy, or religion, it's about being human in the face of the uncertain. You who are watching now might see yourself reflected in these stories. Perhaps you carry a memory, a longing, a restlessness. All of this is legitimate. The fear of death, the hope of continuity, the desire for reunion, the need for meaning, none of these feelings are lesser. On the contrary, they are deep marks of someone who has truly lived. And perhaps, by sharing your doubt or your small hope, you too can become the reason for someone else's relief. Have you thought about that? That your vulnerability might be exactly what someone else needs to move forward? Our community is, above all, a space of welcome. Here, every experience matters. Every story is a spark of light on a night of doubts. Think, what would you like to hear if you were facing your greatest uncertainty? Write in the comments. Talk about how your beliefs, doubts, or hopes have impacted others around you. Don't underestimate the power of your testimony. We've reached the most delicate point of this journey, the moment when all certainty dissolves and only honesty with oneself remains. This is where philosophy comes in, not as an academic discipline, but as a companion in moments of vulnerability. The philosopher Socrates said, "All I know is that I know nothing." This phrase, repeated so many times throughout the centuries, may seem like a cliché, but it carries a radical courage, the courage not to pretend. Hawking, even as a scientist, embodied this spirit. By saying that denying the existence of any form of consciousness after death is also an act of faith, he pointed to the maturity of doubt. It's not about living paralyzed by fear or uncertainty, but about admitting that doubt is part of those who build, who seek, who desire a more truthful world. And why does this matter so much, especially for those who have seen so much in life? Because accepting doubt is, paradoxically, liberating. It frees from dogma, from the need to appear strong, from the burden of definitive answers. It allows us to be pioneers of ourselves, explorers of the unknown, even if the journey is internal. Look at it this way. Everyone you admire at some point admitted not knowing everything. Great leaders, writers, scientists, religious figures, none of them walked without stumbling, without dark nights of the soul. The difference lies in those who had the courage to remain with the question open, to look into the abyss and still move forward. Philosophy teaches us that doubt is a creative force. It doesn't destroy, it only makes us grow. Every new question is a bridge to a larger horizon. If you're watching this video, perhaps you've felt the lack of this courage. Perhaps you wish to be freer from the shackles of absolute certainties. The good news is, you're already on your way. The simple act of watching, questioning, commenting already puts you among those who dare. Take advantage of this moment. Share your biggest doubt in the comments. What would you like to ask a genius like Hawking, if you had the chance? If you have a story of courage in the face of the unknown, tell it. Inspire others with your vulnerability. And remember, questioning doesn't diminish your faith, nor your reason, nor your hope. Questioning is the engine of evolution, of science, of spirituality, and of life itself. We're reaching the end of this intense and perhaps transformative journey. Do you recall the beginning when we mentioned Hawking's secret, the almost forbidden whisper about consciousness after death? Return to that moment now, not as someone seeking a final verdict, but as someone who understands the value of the journey. Whether or not there's a continuity beyond this world, perhaps no one can say. But reflecting on that possibility already plays a fundamental role. It brings us closer, makes us humble, compassionate, aware of our time and our impact. If even the most brilliant mind of the 20th and 21st centuries allowed himself to doubt, you can too. And honestly, perhaps that's exactly the secret of life, not chasing definitive answers, but learning to dance among the questions. Now be part of this movement. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone you believe needs to hear these words. Leave your comment saying which question resonated most with you, or perhaps open yourself to new uncertainties. Your participation strengthens our community and fuels this virtuous cycle of courageous questioning. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this. After all of us, from Hawking to every viewer of this video, are together in a single experience, the conscious search for meaning. May our journey be, above all, marked by generosity with questions and the courage not to settle for less. Thank you for your company this far. Remember, in doubt, there's room for encounter. And it's in this space that we continue, together, living, questioning, and who knows, finding each other in the mystery that unites us.